Hello everybody and welcome to today's tutorial video where I'm going to be showing you how we can make a simple clock for your Unity game. As you'll see in the game playing behind me, in the upper left hand corner I have this timer that's counting upwards that basically times how long the player is in the level for. And it's real nice for like speed running and other types of games where there is sort of like a time component that you want to get through a level as quickly as possible. Now you may have noticed at the beginning of the level there was this countdown timer that said 3, 2, 1, go. I'm not going to be covering that in today's video, but I did break that out into a separate tutorial video, which is also on my channel. Of course, that tutorial video as well as the one that you're watching right now are both parts of this 4-hour-long tutorial that I made that goes through everything of how to create a twin stick shooter from start to finish. Literally everything that you need to know, from a menu to gameplay to kind of tracking some things within your game, all the way up to a game over screen. And it's just a really nice, good overview of how to make an entire game, especially if you're starting out with Unity. However, I do think these timers are useful in many more games than just twin stick shooters, so I decided to break this out into its own video. And if you do enjoy this video and you found it helpful, make sure you hit that like button. Also, feel free to subscribe to the channel for lots more videos on video game development. Of course, if you have any questions for me or suggestions for future videos, feel free to leave those down in the comments section below. And if you'd like to download the assets featured in today's tutorial video, feel free to use the link down in the description below. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump on into the tutorial. As you can see, I'm over here in Unity. And first, I'm just going to show you kind of how everything is set up here. So I have this overlay canvas, and the canvas mode is set to scale with screen size. The reference resolution is 1920 by 1080, and that's just so I can have a nice 16 by 9 aspect ratio. Driving down further, I have a HUD container, which is just set to stretch the entire height and width of the overlay canvas. And then you'll see I have this time counter text here. And the time counter text is anchored to the upper left-hand corner of the screen. And then I kind of use these values to bring it off the edge just a little bit here. Basically here I just have some placeholder text, and this is how I set up the whole font. And then I did put a just 1 pixel outline on it to make it stand out just a little bit more. So that's essentially how the UI is set up. Again, you can download that in the link in the description below. All right, so here I've created this timer controller script, and I'm going to kind of walk through it and show you everything that it does. Before we do anything within the actual timer controller class, we do need to include a couple namespaces. So we need to make sure that we're using the system namespace as well as the Unity engine.ui namespaces. These other three should be included by default. Now moving down to the actual timer controller class itself, we are going to need to make a public static timer controller called instance. Basically, this is sort of an easy way to implement a singleton, and it's going to allow us from other scripts to call functions on the timer controller nice and easily. So in order to set that up, again, all we do is just declare this public static timer controller instance, and then within the awake function, we set instance equal to this. So just pretty simple, and that will allow us to call functions again from outside the class. So right now, if we're say on our game controller, and our begin game function is called within our game controller, we can just do TimerController.instance.begin timer, and it's going to go ahead and call this begin timer function, which we'll be getting to in just a sec. A couple variables that we do need to set up. We just have this one public variable, which is a text variable for the time counter, and that is a reference to this actual time counter object. So again, it's this time counter text that I have set up here in Unity. Next, we're going to go ahead and declare our private variables. So the first one is going to be a private TimeSpan variable called timePlaying. So this TimeSpan is part of the system namespace, and it's what's actually going to allow us to format the time in a really nice manner, so we don't need to kind of do it manually or anything. Here we just have a simple Boolean true/false variable for timer going, and lastly we're going to have a private float variable, which is going to be our elapsed time. So once again, in the awake function, all we're doing is setting the instance equal to this. Next, in the start function, which is called after the awake function, we're going to set the time counter text equal to time:00:00:00. And so this is basically just kind of how we want our time to be formatted. Of course, basically what we're going to have here is we're going to have minutes, seconds, period, fractions of a second. And so this just initializes everything to 0, 0, 0. So when we start our game, it's just going to start at all zeros. Anyways, we're also going to set the timer going variable to false. Now the next thing that we're going to do is have a public void function for begin timer. Again, this is what we can call from something else, such as our game controller script, by doing TimerController.instance.begin timer. So this will call this function here, and it's going to set this timer going value to true. It's going to set the elapsed time to 0 because we're just beginning the timer here. And then it's going to call a start coroutine update timer. And the update timer coroutine is kind of where all the magic is going to be happening here. So we just have this private I enumerator called update timer. Inside it, we have a while loop, which is just going to continue looping through this as long as the timer going value is set to true. So the first line that we're going to do within this while loop is do elapsed time plus equals time.delta time. So this is going to take the elapsed time value, which starts at 0, and then we're going to add time.delta time to that value and set it back to the elapsed time. So time.delta time, if you're not already aware, is basically the time that it took from the previous frame to the current frame. It's that time value in between. And so the idea is that we're going to be looping through this while loop every single frame, and then so we're going to be adding that time difference onto our elapsed time every single frame, so our elapsed time stays current. Next, we're going to set our time playing time span. So the way we do that is we say time playing equals TimeSpan.FromSeconds. So this is just a function built into the TimeSpan class, which converts just a straight floating point seconds into this time span here. So we just pass in the elapsed time because this is a float value, and then it generates this time span instance. So next, we're actually going to go ahead and display this to the screen. So first we need to create a new string value called the time playing str. We're going to set that equal to time, and of course this can be whatever we wanted, so we could make it say like time in game or something like that. But for now, we'll just go ahead and leave it at time. Then we're going to add in the string for time playing .toString, and then here is where we kind of specify the formatting of how we want our time to actually be displayed on the screen. So I'll leave a link to some documentation kind of down in the description below, but basically we have this whole string encapsulated in double quotes. You'll see there's double quotes on either end of this here. And here's where we can kind of specify what we want to be displayed. So if you wanted hours, you could actually do like HH. Of course, if we want minutes first. We can do MM. Seconds are SS. And then the Fs are for fractions of a second. And we can actually go up to, I believe, 6 Fs here. So we can get pretty specific of a time value. Now you'll notice there's a little bit more than just M's and S's and F's going on here. So basically, we have the MM for minute. Now we'll do a single quotation mark, then a colon, then another single quotation mark. And so this is going to basically put this colon character in between our minutes and seconds value. And then we're going to do the same thing between the seconds and fractions of a second. By doing single quotation marks with a period in between. So this is actually going to be displayed in Unity just like this. You'll see that it's time colon 2 colon 35.05. And actually, because we have this set to MM, it's going to actually be displayed as 02 035 05. Now we could change some things a little bit. So I mean, we could put maybe spaces around that if we wanted space between minutes and seconds, or if we didn't want a period between it, we could maybe do a $sign or even like the letter T. And so here's how that would look over in Unity. Of course, you'll see that we have now the spaces around the colon, and we have the T between the seconds and fractions of a second. However, that's not what we want. I just want mine to be displayed like this. So now once we have that string all nicely formatted, we'll just go ahead and set the timeCounter.text equal to the time playing str. And the last thing we need to do in the while loop is do a yield return null, which means it's going to return to this point in the coroutine on the next frame. So it's going to go ahead and render this frame, and then on the next frame it's going to come back to this. It's going to go ahead and check the while loop and to make sure that the timer going value is still set to true. If it is, it's going to run through all this and just continually updating the timer each and every frame. Now, if we do want to end our timer, again, we have another public function set up. It's a public void end timer. All it does is it sets the timer going value to false. And then so what's going to happen is when this code returns to it and it checks if it's false, it's going to go ahead and exit out the while loop and complete the operation of the coroutine here. So of course we can just save this and go back over into Unity, and whatever object you have this timer controller on, you're going to want to go ahead and just make sure you set this time counter to this time counter text here so everything displays properly. So with that all set, we're about ready to go ahead and test out our game. So as you'll see that our placeholder text is still set to all these funky numbers, but that doesn't matter because when we actually start our game, it's going to zero out as we explicitly told it to do. And you'll see that we now start counting up seconds and fractions of a second. And then when it actually counts all the way up to 60 here, it's going to roll over and it's going to count 1 minute here. So we can just go ahead and wait that out so I can prove to you that's actually what's happening. "58, 59, and 60, and then it rolls over to 1 minute here. So then, of course, seconds start continuing up, and yeah, so that's pretty much a basic timer. So I mean, looks cool, right? So anyways, that's pretty much how you can create a basic timer in Unity. If you did find this video helpful and you learned something, make sure you hit that like button. Also feel free to subscribe to the channel for lots more videos on video game development. Of course, if you have any questions for me or suggestions for future videos, feel free to leave those down in the comments section below. And if you do want to download the project files featured in this video, you can go ahead and use the link down in the description below. But I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.